Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Majestic Collectibles. This is podcast number 4. It is February 8th, 2023. If you remember last week, first of all, thank you for listening. I was asking for some suggestions for topics for the podcast, and I did get a couple, actually, and they were really good. Shout out to my friends Chad and Corey up in Minnesota. They called me right up and helped the old guy out, and I appreciate that. And what they came up with was my greatest collections. And I'm not going to sit here and rattle through a bunch of collections because I can't remember them all, first of all. So I just kind of picked out a few highlights for this one. And I got some kind of, interesting stories that I think I'll do at a different podcast that's kind of related to this. So this will be a lot of fun, not a lot of whining about grading or collections or flippers or people not knowing what they're doing or yelling at dealers for them not knowing what they're doing. So this should be a lot of fun. Again, if you guys think of a topic, gosh, let me know. If it's something I feel confident to talk on, we'll do it. See it at a later date. So we're going to go with comic collections. That's what I've been doing the longest is collecting and dealing in comic books. So these are all going to be comic book collections. I'm going to start out. I really debated whether to start out, with like 4, 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it backwards. So I'm going to do a countdown here, and I've kind of named these collections a little bit. So stick with me. So number 4, we're going to start with number 4 and countdown. Number 4 was around 2017. I believe fall of 2017. Chad or Corey or somebody over there will correct me if I got that wrong, but I think that's when it was, maybe September. And this was out of Tremont, Minnesota. This was at a live auction, antique and collectibles auction, and I'm calling it the Dumb Luck Collection. And it also has a dual name, which was the Cheapest Collection. So I don't know. We'll explain that here. I'll explain that as we go. So I got a call from Chad, and this is what, 6 years ago now. And he says, "Hey, there's this auction. There's really not a lot listed, but that was on the bill of sale. But he says, I want to go. There's a lot of extra stuff there that wasn't listed. There could be some really good stuff." So I thought, okay, I met him. It was about 3-4 hour trip. And Tremont's just a little town. Actually, it's two towns on one side of the road, and they combined and called it Tremont, which is an interesting story. And we get there on the street, Main Street, again, very small town. They've got the flat racks just sitting out in the middle of the street. Streets are blocked off. They had a whole bunch of tin toys, cap guns, cast iron stuff, advertising pieces. Had some old John Deere tractors and manuals and egg-based stuff. Didn't see what we were looking for or, anything I was really interested in. And some people started talking. Somebody was talking, hey, there's supposed to be magazines, Life magazines. They didn't see them. And one of the auction people said, oh, they're in the house. The comic books are in the porch, and the Life magazines are in the living room right next to it. Well, Chad and I overheard that, and we're looking at each other. It's like, what in the world are you talking about? There's nothing on the sale bill, about this having comics. So we go into the porch, and I am not kidding you. Old porch, old house, must have been a 100-year-old house, rundown porch. So we go in, and they've got 4, maybe 5 8-foot tables side by side, just stacked, and I mean stacked, with flats of Golden Age comics. 1940s, I think the newest ones in there are probably 1954, 55, but most of these were 1948, 49, and older. And we could not believe it. We were absolutely blown away. They had Superman. They had Batman, 4-color Donald Duck books, Dick Tracy. I'm trying to think. There's Green Lantern was in there. There's some crime. Not a lot of Dells, which really surprised me. Not a lot of Classics Illustrated. A lot of superhero stuff. The Dells that were there were pretty much, 4-color Disney and some 4-color Bugs Bunny stuff, which isn't as good as the Duck books, but still beats most titles. And we stood around, and this was an also ran. These auctioneers did not think these comics were worth anything, and you could tell it. So we stood around for almost 4 hours. It was getting dark, and they finally sent some junior auctioneer guy in. He says it's getting dark in the porch, which was true. There's evidently no lights in the house, or very limited. I don't know. And we went in, and there's about 30 of us standing around. Most of them, I would say, probably in their mid 50s or older at the time. And they've all got the Overstreet price guide. They got their notebooks. They're just like furiously going through these flats, writing down notes. Well, I didn't do that. I've never done that. I mean, I look through the flats, but I do not walk around with the notebook and take meticulous notes and walk around with the price guide. And the auction started, and the first flat up, there was a series of, I think it was 5 or 6 Superman comics. And the lowest numbered one in there, I believe, was number 6, and the highest number one was 18 or 19. And nice shape, VG to fine, which for Golden Age is pretty good. And what do you guys think that went for? I'm going to let you think for just a second. I was prepared to probably pay in the neighborhood of $300 to $400. Because keep in mind, I was hoping to get these for resale. All right, I don't collect Superman. I love Golden Age. But that's not one of the ones I keep. And I am not kidding you. This is the absolute truth. I still have the receipts from this auction. Those little tan ones. If you've been to an auction and they write through and then they leave like ditto paper or whatever. They leave that copy on the oak tag and they tear them off. I still have these, so I can back this up. The first flat of those Superman comics went for $27.50. $27.50. Absolutely insane. And Chad was standing by me, and he just looked at me like what just happened, and I didn't know what just happened. And so here's the deal. This went on for about an hour, probably a little over an hour. That was the second highest flat of comics cost-wise. So everything else I bought was cheaper than that. And it's going to make you sick here. The highest I paid, I did pay $300 or $400 because it was way at the end of the auction. And finally, somebody else in there decided to fight for a flat of comics. It wasn't even a very good one. Had a lot of crime and stuff. I think it was Dick Tracy and things, which cool books, but not a lot of interest. And he ran me up, I think it was $360, $70, $80, maybe $400 on it. And then the last flat, and these guys started grousing at me, oh, this guy, and they were getting chippy and mouthy and stuff. And so the last flat, so I missed one flat of comics. Didn't have a lot in it. I do think there's one like 50s Flash Gordon book I would have really liked to have, but other than that, there wasn't much in there. And I ran that thing up to like $800, and it was getting close to $900, and I just let it go. So whoever got that got about $150, $200 worth of comics for almost $900 on the thing, and they were so mad at me. And I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why, because they were standing there. They could have put their hands in there just as well as I did, and they had the guide. But I got a Batman 47, and this is the truth. So I had a Batman 47. If you know your Golden Age, that's the first full origin of Batman. And that's one I had sold a long time ago and I wanted back. and it was nicer than that, than one I had sold. And it also had a 4-color number 9, which is one Donald Duck 4-color I was missing. And I can't remember if that was 1939, 1940. It was somewhere in there. Not in great shape. Probably just a solid, good plus at the most. But those were together. And the low end at that time on the Batman 47 was about $1,400. The low end on the 4-color 9 at that time was almost $3,000. Very rare book. I've been doing this a long time. Never seen that book. Never had a chance to buy it. I got that flat, and it had like 4 or 5 Batman, 4 or 5 4-color Donald Ducks, and maybe a couple other oddballs. I think it was $12. Yeah, you heard that right. It was like $12 or $14 for that flat of comics. And these guys are sitting here with the Overstreet price guide in their hands, looking them up. How do you let that go for that? I don't know. But that's why it was dumb luck, because I had no idea they were even at the auction. Not a clue. Zero. And, it was the cheapest because, so I bought, I think it wasn't a huge amount. Well, for Golden Age, it was a pretty big amount. But I think it was around 500 books. And it was like $900. It was under $1,000 for the comics. So basically, I didn't even pay $2 a piece on average for that collection. With 25, 30 other people standing around at the auction wanting to bid. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Kind of a Twilight Zone episode. I don't know. But that's number 4. Number 3, and I'm going to call it the... I guess the most valuable collection. Just kind of dollars and cents wise overall. This is back in 1998, and it came from the state of Washington, far eastern state of Washington, near the Montana border. So, no kidding. This is in the early days of eBay and online sales, and I had an email and just said, hey, would you be interested in some comics? That I've got Silver and Bronze Age, Fantastic Four, and Avengers, and didn't have any Spider-Man. Had some DC stuff that was actually Copper Age that wasn't very good. A lot of oddball Marvel titles, 2-in-1 and stuff. But I said, yeah. Well, I didn't know he was in Washington State. He says, well, give me your address and I'll mail them to you. And I'm thinking, well, mail them to me in Northwest Iowa? Well, okay, So I got a copy paper box. Maybe, I don't know, a couple of weeks after that. I'd kind of forgotten about it. Copy paper box shows up, handwritten label on it. So I open it up. And sure enough, it was a box full of Avengers. Wasn't a complete run, but it did go down, I think, to number 6 or 8. And then from about, I want to say, issue 60 or 70, then it was complete, a complete run of Avengers up through almost 300. And at that time, this is way before the movies, guys, so there was not actually a lot of monetary value in those at that time, but I can't even remember what I offered him, and I said, well, thanks for sending them, I said, this is what, I'd be in on them for, and he's like, oh, that sounds good. He said, send me a check, so I did, and, I suppose it was probably, again, maybe 2-3 weeks, and all of a sudden another box shows up. Well, okay, this one had a bunch of oddball Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Premiere, Marvel's Greatest Stories, a lot of their reprint titles. Didn't have really even any Marvel Tales, just maybe 4 or 5 with the Spidey stuff. Was not a great box, still even today would not be a great box. But, these things were really ultra high grade. I mean, these things are probably 8.5 to 9 4s. I don't think any of them had ever been read. So I made him an offer, and he took that. And he says, well, I'm going to send you a couple more, one at a time. So I said, okay. Sent me the third box. Again, probably a couple weeks later. The box was ripped open. One of the corners had blown out. The comics were literally sliding out of the corner of this copy paper box. I'm like, oh no. So I take the lid off. I'm really careful. This is the truth. The comics that were hanging out of the corner of the box, Fantastic Four, Silver Age Fantastic Four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The first 7 issues of the Fantastic Four were literally falling out of the corner of this box. I just about fainted. I could not believe it. They were there, and he had a complete run of Fantastic Four up to I think it was a little over 300, as I recall, and they were nice, man. This is just when grading first started, and those early FFs I just mentioned, I sent them all in to be graded. The first books I ever sent to CGC, and the number one came back, I believe it was a VF minus 7.5. The other ones came back all around about a 9. I think I got 192, the rest were 9s, something like that. And I needed the money pretty badly. My wife had lost her job, and she had found another one down here where we're at now in the Des Moines area, and that was about a 2.5 hour drive. And, our youngest son was on the way. He was due in about 5 months, and had a little daughter. My oldest was about 4. And I had to sell my house. I had to put a down payment on another house. This all happened really, really fast, kind of in the middle of this collection. And the reason it's the most valuable, so I sent those 7 off to Hake's Auctions. They're out in York, Pennsylvania. They are not paying me to say this, and I haven't auctioned anything with them since like 2006 or 8. Not that I wouldn't send it out there again. But I set 4 world record prices at that time for those FFs in the grade they were in. They even used them in their Overstreet ad and on their website for about 2 years. And those were my comics, and I've got the auction catalog. The total for just the FFs, which I sent a few others in that actually didn't sell till later. They didn't make the reserve, and $19,700, and that was the FF1. The whole thing I got about $43,000 after fees on it. Well, that dumb book today had clear $300,000 without even blinking. Wasn't pressed. I didn't do any pressing, nothing like that at the time. So, it wouldn't surprise me if that darn thing was a $500,000 book today. Basically almost 30 years later. And if I had to have one back just for monetary value, that would be it, man. That's probably, with all of those and the grades they were in, I bet you it'd be close to $1,700,000, $800,000, $900,000 for that batch. But that's the way it goes, and I was able to buy my house and have some place to live, and stuff for the family. So I can't say is that it was a total loss. So I needed to do it. But that's the most valuable collection. There was one more box, a copy paper box they sent. And it was all DC Comics Presents. And if you know, I had the first Masters of the Universe in there, and I had the one Superman Superboy. And at that time, they weren't worth a lot of money either. But they were, I would have graded them, and I think that I got 9.6, 9.8 out of either one of those. But at that time, they just, I think the one was a $50 or $60 book. The other one was like a $15 or $25 book, something like that. And that was it. So that was the most valuable collection, 1998, out of the state of Washington. Never met the guy, never heard from him after that, and that was it. So number 2, this is around the year 2000. Largest collection. Rock Rapids, Iowa. That's right on the Minnesota border, basically. And bronze and copper, I don't know exactly. So this is a guess, because I wasn't going to count them all. So it was JR Comics. He used to advertise in the Comics Buyer's Guide, full-page ads. If anybody listening remembers him, he was an advertiser a long time. And he calls me up at my shop in Storm Lake, and he says, hey, you're going to buy my comics. Get a rental truck and meet me at my place in Rock Rapids. Well, I didn't know him. I've never met him before, never bumped into him since. He just called me, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? Who is this? And he told me, and he's like, well, have you heard of me? And I said, no, which was true. I didn't know who this guy was. He says, okay. He says, yeah, just you're gonna have to get a rental truck. He says, I'm gonna sell these to you for $2,500. He said, can you come in a couple of days? I said, sure. And I did. So I went, and my dad and my uncle from Michigan was visiting. So we all hopped in this old U-Haul rental, diesel motor, stick shift. I'm not kidding you, it didn't even get 3 miles to the gallon. Oh my goodness, it was a terrible little machine. So we trucked up there, had to fill up halfway up there. So it was where I was living at that time. It was about 95 miles. And I could only drive about 60 before the gas gauge on that thing started hitting rock bottom. It was that bad. So we go up. He's got this giant warehouse, not like today giant, but back then, if you've seen the older style warehouses. Walk in, and I am not kidding you, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxes, brown boxes, all that said Department 56 on the side. And he told me at the time he was getting out of the comics because there wasn't enough money, and he was selling Department 56, and he had 2 or 3 UPS trucks stop every day because he was ordering these from the factory, I guess. I don't know. It was stacked. I'm not kidding you. 12, 15 feet high on these giant pallets. He had to have a forklift to get them down. And that's what he was doing, and the comic books were in the way. So we walked to the back of the warehouse, and there's this huge cube. More of a rectangle, I guess, but it was like 5 foot high, and it was probably, I would say, 10 foot across at least, and about 25, 30 foot long. And all it was long boxes. And they were not empty. They were packed. Most of these weren't bagged or boarded, so they must have had, I don't know, must have been right at 400 comics in each one. And I wasn't going to look through them. And he's like, there they are. And I talked to him. I said, you've obviously gone through these. He says, oh, yeah. I says, is there any gravy left on there? Because, this is problematic. I talked in an early podcast about capacity. Well, I had no place to go with these boxes. And I still don't know exactly how many boxes there were. I did at the time. Someplace we took pictures with my dad and uncle and wrote it down, and I can't find it. I need to find that. But it was probably, I want to say it was like 331 or 441 boxes. I can't remember. But it would have been basically, we figure between 240 to 280,000 comics, just an estimate in there. And my dad, which you guys don't know him, Chad and Corey know him. He's Dutch guy, so he wants to save a nickel, and he's like, "Oh, that's a good deal." He says, "See if he'll drop it $500 down to $2,000." I'm like, "Nope." I says, "I'm not doing it." I says, "It's a great price." I said, "It's going to be a lot of work, but I think I can make pretty good money on it." And so we did. We made the deal. And he says, well, since you didn't haggle me on the price, I always wondered if he heard my dad say something. I don't know if he overheard us or not. he says, well, since you didn't haggle on the price, I got a few more boxes back here, and I'll just throw them in for the same price. And I says, okay. I said, that's really nice, thank you. So he pulls out, and there wasn't a lot, like maybe four or five more long boxes. Well, the lids weren't on. They were stuffed full of Treasury editions, those large, oversized, like tabloid-sized comics. I had Spider-Man, Muhammad Ali, and Superman was in there. Had a whole bunch of the Batman ones, had Smurfs, had just all sorts of stuff. And heck, that was the best 5 boxes in there, because some of those boxes, I am not kidding you, I had probably almost 2 full long boxes, and I mean stuff full of Devil Dinosaur #1. Okay, and whatever that Marvel premiere thing is with the 3D man, I had almost 3 long boxes full of that. So there was a lot of crud in there, and not being bagged and boarded and packed that tight, nothing super high grade. So again, nothing, money-wise, I did okay just from the sheer volume. I threw them out 50 cents a piece at that time, 3 for $1, a guy couldn't lose. But I had to sell most of them because of the same reason for the FF, is we had to move down where we are now. And I didn't have any room. I had no room for this mountain of comic boxes. And so the day before 9/11, so 9/10, my wife's birthday, ironically, we had an auction, and I was hoping to get enough money to put that money from the auction and the money with the Fantastic Four stuff, put all that money together, and put the down payment on the house. And it was a terrible auction. I was selling long boxes, hundreds and hundreds of long boxes, $2 a long box. I just got pummeled. Even after cost and all those boxes, I don't even think I got like $4,000 and some dollars. So I technically didn't lose money. As far as what I paid cash-wise, because I had been selling them off that collection before we had to move. But boy, you talk about brutal. If I'd have had that collection today, I could have done a lot more with it. But again, had to have a place to live, and that worked out, so I can't complain about that. That was the largest collection, Rock Rapids, Iowa, from JR Comics. The rarest, so this is my favorite collection. This is #1 on my list for a couple of reasons. 1994, Galva, Iowa, up in northwest Iowa. Got a phone call. A guy said he had, now let me get this right. He had 1,000 Golden Age comics, and he needed to sell them. He was moving or retired. Had to get him out of the way, wanted to know if I was interested, and I says, yeah. He says, well, I need 2,000 cash, $2 a book for him. And I'm thinking, even in 94, the prices were starting to go up on these things, and I'm thinking, well, okay, this doesn't sound right, And so I called my dad. I says, hey, Dad, I don't want to go over here by myself. I was like 23, 24, but I'm like, man, I said, something seems just weird by it, So he's like, yeah, it sounds like fun. So we did. We went over another old farmhouse, much nicer condition than the one in Tremont, I might add. People were living in it. Same deal. I walked into the porch, and no flats, just stacks. Stacks and stacks and stacks of Golden Age comics. Batman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, All-Star. I got a Wonder Woman 8, the first appearance out of there. Or All-Star 8, excuse me. All-Star #8. First Wonder Woman was in there. Terrible condition. That's where that Batman 47 came. I had to sell that after I moved to try and pay bills. That's a whole nother story. A couple of years after I moved down here, I sold most of my Golden Age stuff. But I had long runs. I had all winners. I had Human Torch. I had Captain America. I had these weird sci-fi horror ones. I had some really super rare books. And I would have never sold them if I didn't have to. And I did. I don't think I've got one book left from that collection, but it's always been stuck, in my heart, my mind as my best collection. It was the first collection. You always remember the first time, right? And I'll never see that again. Even Tremont, as good as that auction was not comparable to this one in Gelva. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. Green Lantern, All-American, All-Star, crime books. I don't think there's one funny animal book, one Dell book in that whole collection. It was all superhero and crime stuff. And a lot of the timely books that I've never seen again. I mean, I see them on auction and at the big shows for, more than what I've spent on all my cars combined, kind of thing. Just absolutely amazing. And that's what makes it fun. I love buying those collections, even if they're not the most profitable, which, Rock Rapids turned out not to be all that profitable. Tremont was profitable, but I kept the two best books, so, that kind of, lowered the take on it. And I still have them, still not planning on selling them and keeping them. And that's it. That's my top 4 comic book collections. So thanks again to Chad and Corey for giving me the idea. Hey, if you guys, I'm telling you, send me some ideas. I can blabber. You guys know that by now. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching our videos. Leave me your questions and comments. And, we'll catch you next time.